The air inside the cafe carried the familiar blend of espresso and freshly baked pastries. Though Dana hardly noticed, the usual hum of conversation had dwindled to a quiet murmur as the afternoon lull stretched longer than usual. For Dana, this shift felt like an eternity. Her feet ached from hours of constant motion, and every tick of the clock seemed to slow, mocking her. Rent was due in 2 days. Her phone bill was overdue, and the measly tips she'd collected that morning felt like a cruel joke. Dana tightened her ponytail, her thoughts churning as she wiped down the last table by the window. She glanced at her phone and sighed, just one more hour. If she could just get through the shift without collapsing, she'd count that as a victory. Tips had been sparse, a handful of loose change from patrons who barely looked up from their phones. She was used to it. But today it stung a little more than usual. The manager, an older woman with a sympathetic gaze, offered her an encouraging nod. But Dana barely noticed. She was on autopilot now, going through the motions, waiting for the day to end. The bell above the door jingled, breaking Dana's trance. She turned instinctively, order pad in hand, to greet the new customer. A young man entered, his movements calm and deliberate. He was tall and lean, dressed simply in a plain shirt and slacks. Yet there was an unmistakable air of composure about him. 2 men followed closely behind, blending seamlessly into the background, their sharp eyes scanning the room. Dana's gaze lingered on the young man for a moment longer than she intended. Something about him seemed familiar. As he settled at a table in the far corner, Dana approached, trying to muster her best smile. "Good afternoon," she said, her voice steady despite the flutter in her chest. "Can I get you something to start?" The young man looked up, and for a fleeting second, Dana nearly forgot her rehearsed line. His features were striking. But it wasn't just his appearance that caught her off guard, it was the calmness in his expression. The quiet confidence that seemed out of place in their unassuming cafe. Then it clicked. This was Barron Trump, the youngest son of the former president. She had seen his face in countless headlines and photos over the years, though he appeared much more grounded in person than she had imagined. "I'll just have a cappuccino," Barron said, his tone polite but reserved. "And maybe one of those croissants." Dana nodded quickly, scribbling down the order. "Absolutely. Anything else?" He shook his head with a faint smile. "That'll be perfect. Thank you." She turned toward the counter, her mind racing. It wasn't every day a public figure walked into their small cafe. As she prepared his cappuccino, she stole a glance at him over her shoulder. He sat quietly, his posture relaxed, gazing out the window as if lost in thought. Unlike most patrons, he wasn't glued to a phone or tapping away on a laptop. His stillness was oddly calming. The steam from the espresso machine hissed, grounding Dana in the moment. She poured the frothy milk with care, determined not to let her nerves get the better of her. Balancing the tray carefully, she approached his table and set down the coffee and croissant. "Here you go," she said, her tone polite yet distant. Barron looked up again, meeting her gaze. "Thank you." "You're welcome," she replied, retreating to the counter. As she busied herself cleaning tables and refilling sugar containers, she found herself glancing at him more often than she cared to admit. Something about his presence felt different, almost magnetic. Minutes passed, and the cafe grew quieter still. Dana noticed Barron pull a pen from his pocket and lean over the receipt, scribbling something quickly before folding it neatly under his coffee cup. He stood, gathering his phone and coat, and made his way toward the exit. "Thank you for coming," Dana called out softly, more out of habit than expectation. Barron paused, turning back just enough to offer a faint smile. "Have a good day." The bell above the door chimed, and he was gone. The room seemed to exhale with his departure, leaving Dana standing in the middle of the cafe, tray in hand, staring at the empty table he'd left behind. She approached slowly, her curiosity piqued. Beneath the coffee cup was the folded receipt. As she picked it up, her fingers brushed against something heavy, a tip. She assumed. But when she unfolded the receipt, her breath caught in her throat. The tip was far from ordinary. 4 crisp digits stared back at her. A sum so generous it made her knees weak. But it wasn't just the money that floored her, it was the note scrawled above it. The words were simple yet profound: "Your kindness and hard work don't go unnoticed. My family has been where you are. Stay strong. Brighter days are coming." Dana read the note twice. Then a third time. Her hands trembling. She blinked rapidly. But the tears spilled over anyway. Hot and unbidden. The exhaustion of the day. The relentless weight of her struggles, all of it seemed to dissolve in that moment. She sank into the chair across from where Barron had sat, clutching the receipt as though it were a lifeline. For the first time in weeks. Maybe months. Dana felt seen. Not just as a waitress or a service worker, but as a person. The words on the note carried a weight of empathy she hadn't known she needed. And though Barron had disappeared into the bustling streets, his gesture lingered, wrapping her in a warmth she hadn't felt in a long time. This, Dana realized, was more than an act of generosity. It was a reminder that even in the smallest moments, kindness could carry immeasurable power. The cafe had quieted again, save for the low hum of the espresso machine and the faint notes of background music. Dana sat for a moment longer, her hands still trembling as she stared at the note. Her mind raced with questions. Why had he left such a large tip? Why those particular words? And why her? She folded the receipt carefully and slipped it into her apron pocket, glancing toward the door as if half expecting Barron to return. Of course, he didn't. The reality of the moment felt surreal. Like something out of a dream. "Dana, you all right?" The voice startled her. It was her manager. A woman whose sharp tone was softened by genuine concern. She stood with her arms crossed, watching Dana closely. "I'm fine," Dana replied, though her voice betrayed her. "It's just," she hesitated, unsure how to explain. Her manager's eyes flicked to the table and then back to Dana. "What happened?" Dana pulled the note and receipt from her pocket, her movements slow and deliberate, as if handling something fragile. She handed them over without a word, watching her manager's reaction closely. The older woman unfolded the paper and gasped softly when her eyes landed on the tip. "Is this real?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Dana nodded, her throat tightening as she fought back a fresh wave of emotion. Her manager read the note, and her expression shifted. The sharpness in her eyes gave way to something softer, almost maternal. "That's incredible," she murmured, handing it back. "It's not just the money," Dana said, clutching the paper to her chest. "It's what he wrote. I don't even know how to explain it. But it's like he understood." Her manager gave her a knowing look. "Sometimes people see more than we realize," she said gently. "You're here every day, working your tail off, always kind to people even when they don't deserve it." Maybe he saw that. Dana nodded, though she wasn't sure she entirely believed it. She had spent months feeling invisible, just another face in a sea of tired workers trying to make ends meet. That someone like Barron Trump could notice her, let alone leave such a personal and empathetic message, felt almost too good to be true. Word of the tip and the note spread quickly among her co-workers. By the end of her shift, the cafe was buzzing with whispers and stolen glances. "Did you hear?" one of the baristas asked, her voice tinged with excitement. Dana got a huge tip from Barron Trump. The attention made Dana uneasy. She wasn't used to being in the spotlight, and part of her wished she could keep the moment private. But the note's words echoed in her mind, grounding her. Brighter days are coming. She clung to that hope, even as she struggled to process what it meant. By the time her shift ended, Dana felt a mix of exhaustion and exhilaration. She tucked the note safely into her wallet and pulled her coat tightly around her as she stepped into the crisp evening air. The streets of Cleveland buzzed with their usual energy, car horns, chatter, the occasional laughter of a passerby. Yet, for Dana, the world felt quieter, as if her perspective had shifted. As she made her way home, she found herself replaying the moment in her mind, Barron's calm demeanor, the sincerity in his eyes, and the weight of his words. It wasn't just a tip. It was something far deeper, a lifeline. A reminder that someone, somewhere, cared enough to see her. And for the first time in a long while, Dana felt a glimmer of hope. The following morning, Dana woke to the faint light of dawn spilling through the thin curtains of her apartment. The note sat on her bedside table, folded neatly next to her phone. She had reread it before going to bed, memorizing every word. It had felt like a lifeline last night, a glimmer of something she couldn't quite name but desperately wanted to hold on to. Today, however, that fragile peace was interrupted by a series of relentless pings from her phone. Groaning, Dana rolled over and grabbed it. Her heart skipped as she saw dozens of messages, all from co-workers and friends. Is this you? Check the news. You're trending. Her thumb hovered over one text, which included a link. She hesitated, then clicked. The headline stared back at her. Barron Trump leaves waitress a heartfelt note and generous tip. Internet reacts. Below it was a picture of the note, her note, and a snippet of the story. The article detailed how Barron's gesture had sparked a wave of online conversation, with people praising his kindness and speculating about the waitress who had received it. Dana sat up, her chest tightening. How had this gotten out? She scrolled down to find comments flooding the post, some kind, others skeptical. This is the kind of humanity we need more of, one read. Another said, of course it's a PR stunt. Why else would he leave a note like that? She tossed her phone aside, overwhelmed. At work, the cafe felt different. As soon as Dana walked in, the room buzzed with energy. Co-workers greeted her with knowing smiles, and regulars eyed her with subtle curiosity. Even her manager had a mischievous glint in her eye. Our local celebrity, she teased, handing Dana an apron. You're famous now. I didn't ask for this, Dana muttered, tying the apron around her waist. She wasn't used to this kind of attention. For her, the note had been something personal, almost sacred. To see it dissected and debated by strangers felt invasive. The day dragged on, with Dana fielding curious questions from co-workers and customers alike. What was he like? Someone asked. Was he really that nice? Dana forced a polite smile, offering vague answers. She wasn't ready to share what the note had truly meant to her. By lunchtime, the situation escalated. A news crew parked outside the cafe, cameras and microphones at the ready. Dana groaned, peeking at them from behind the counter. Seriously, she muttered under her breath. Her manager approached, placing a hand on her shoulder. They want to talk to you. You don't have to. Of course. But it could be a good thing. Dana shook her head, her nerves fraying. I'm just a waitress. I didn't do anything special. Her manager smiled gently. Maybe that's why it matters so much. The words gave Dana pause. As overwhelming as this all felt, she couldn't ignore the ripple effect Barron's gesture had created. People were talking about kindness, about hope. Maybe, just maybe, her story could mean something more. For now, though, she wasn't ready to face the cameras. The note was still hers, and she wasn't ready to let it go.